Thanks. So one of the things that the Raspberry Pi 5 kind of prompted me to think about was what to do with all the old Raspberry Pis I've got sitting in a box in kind of gathering dust. It's especially true because I shut down a business in 2020 due to COVID, and I pulled out a load of Raspberry Pis that I deployed there, ranging from the Raspberry Pi 1, 2, and 3. They're all running different things. So I ended up with a whole pile of the things just sat there doing nothing. And I was like, there must be better uses, things I could do with these that would be a really useful purpose. So I kind of want to provoke a little bit of, what are your ideas? What have you thought about doing with the Raspberry Pi, an old Raspberry Pi that maybe isn't cutting edge, but you could do something good with? So one of the ideas that I came up with was a certificate authority. Now, if you're anything like me, you've got lots and lots of different devices sat on your home network, and all of them either don't support SSL or they do support SSL, and they end up with some self-signed certificate that every time you browse to it, it goes, warning, this is an insecure website. This has security problems. Are you sure you want to proceed? And that annoys me. And also the security kind of consultant element of me goes, it's really bad practice to get into the habit of just clicking, ignore these errors. So I was like, well, why don't I just stand up a certificate authority? How hard can it be to use Raspberry Pi? So there's a little bit of talk about that. Sorry, do you say something? So I should probably just explain to people the very basics of what a certificate authority is, for those who don't know. So when you browse to a website and it has an SSL certificate there, it validates several things. One is the date range the certificate's valid for. It validates that the name on the certificate, or one of the alternate names, is the name of the website that you're actually accessing. So if you access a particular, whatever name you've put in, it makes sure that name is valid with that certificate is valid for that name. You can't use IP addresses; you have to use names. And it also makes sure that the certificate meets a whole bunch of security kind of standards and is signed by a certificate authority that you trust. So the whole concept is public key encryption. So public key encryption, the idea is that you have, rather than just having one key that you both know, you have a private key and a public key. And if I sign something with my private key, then you can use my public key to verify that, yes, the private key was used to sign that particular thing. So what that means is that if I've got a private key stored away on my little Raspberry Pi over here, it can sign things, and I can copy my public key around, and any device can then use that public key to say, oh, this other certificate that I found is signed by this private key that I am trusting. So that's the some of the basics. So the idea is that you have a public key that is your certificate authority key that you put as a trusted certificate authority onto your different end devices, so your laptop, your mobile phone, all those kind of things. And when you then try and access your internal devices via a name, the certificate that it presents has been signed by a private key that's paired with that trusted public key. So I thought, let's do this on a Raspberry Pi, and this is a Raspberry Pi 2, so you don't need anything special. Raspberry Pi 2 is not fast at all, and it does actually take a few seconds to do the digital signing, but that's fine. So this is old Raspberry Pi 2. What's interesting is the different support dates. When I looked at this last month, was that Bookworm was not supported in the RPI 2. Whether I believe that may change, but I don't know for certain. Bullseye is supported, but also Ubuntu is supported, and Ubuntu at the time that I looked at this had the longest support. So I thought, I'm going to go with Ubuntu because it's different. I've not used Ubuntu on the Raspberry Pi. So one lesson I did learn is never tick the box when you're using the Raspberry Pi imager to say, Wi-Fi, configure Wi-Fi. When you're deploying to an RPI2 that does not have Wi-Fi, it disables the Ethernet port as part of the Wi-Fi config and doesn't enable any Wi-Fi because it doesn't have the hardware to do so. And then you get no connectivity and nothing works. And you can't just easily go in and enable it, and half the tools aren't installed. So yeah, I end up re-imaging and just not ticking the Wi-Fi enable option, and it worked. So yeah, for this particular process, I did the normal thing, did the app update, upgrade, just to get everything fully patched up and ready. I created a folder because to keep everything there. So the first thing you have to do is generate a private key that your certificate authority is going to be using. So there's a command here which is just generate that. I've used AES 256. So AES 256 is a sort of a known strong cipher. You just don't use something like triple des, which is known to be compromised. So yeah, you specify a password that just secures your certificate, your private key, and then you can use this OpenSSL to generate your certificate authority certificate. You specify an age, how long it's going to last for, and that's effectively you're just generating these. You're using an input of the key and then an output of the is a certificate file. So you'll be prompted for the password for your key. So your key, basically, when you've created it, you've set a password on it that is kind of encrypting your key almost. So if you lose that password, you've lost your key. But what this is doing is creating that public key to your private key. So you'll run it through, you'll end up with a load of stuff as per this screen image. And this is all on my blog page, trickit.com. And literally that's it. You've now created your certificate authority. You've got a .pem file, which is your certificate. It doesn't contain the private key, it's just the public key. And you can copy that to your devices. And every device is slightly different. So in Windows, you can just fire up, so if you fire up mmc.exe, for example, you can then go add remove snap-in, certificates, add, and this is not run as an admin, so it doesn't work. Second. So certificates, and it will then ask you what you want to do, and I want to do it as the computer account, local computer. And then inside here, you'll find trusted root certificate authorities. So you'll have a load in here already. These are all the internet ones. And then all you're doing is you're importing your own one into here. And the same, this will work. This is kind of similar process for every OS. Every operating system will have its own set of trusted root certificates. You just need to import it into here. And then, so that's fine. You're now trusting a root certificate authority. But you actually need to have certificates on your devices. And there's two ways to do this. One is that you can create what's called a CSR, a certificate signing request. And the idea behind this is the device itself will generate the request. And it basically follows a similar process to the public certificate with the certificate authority, which is that it generates a private key on the device itself, and generates the public key that it wants you to then sign. So what it will do is it effectively generates that certificate that it wants you to sign, and you take that certificate and you give it to your certificate authority, which is your little Raspberry Pi running OpenSSL. And all you're doing is then taking the private key and this certificate and signing that certificate with your private key. So you can either obtain the CSR that way, or you can do it all on your Raspberry Pi. You can create the whole certificate there. The drawback with that is that your private key gets generated on your little Raspberry Pi, and you then have to copy that private key across to the device, which is less secure because you're now transporting the private key. How much of a risk that is in your home, yeah, probably isn't that bad, but the best thing is if you can use the CSR. So you can generate a CSR. So if you've got a Linux device, you can run OpenSSL to generate it. All the steps are in here. You have to define what you're going to use it for. So you can get certificates for lots of different purposes. And there's a few here. Those are the typical ones you'd need for a web page. And then finally, you would sign the CSR, as I said, on your little Raspberry Pi. And then you take the signed certificate back to your original device, import it. Normally, when you've generated the CSR, there's an a response file, which you then just import. And then, hey presto, that device will now be using your certificate. And yeah, then you can test it. So this is me running that same test. I set up a name. So what I had to do was you can either do it via host file on your computer to specify whatever name you want, or if you've got a domain, you can just stick stuff in there as you wish. So you've got names that resolve into IP addresses that will work. If you don't have names, then it won't work. It has to have a name. So these are the common kind of errors. Your name didn't quite match for some reason. The trust chain is broken for some reason. The dates are out because your date is wrong somewhere, or the purpose was wrong. So all the kind of basic stuff there that could go wrong. But you need to be aware that you've now made your devices trust this little Raspberry Pi certificate key that you've got. So keep that safe. Don't let that key out. And if you ever lose it, delete it from the trusted. You can just go in and delete the trusts, the trusted root authorities out of your devices, and it'll stop trusting them. The other thing is, remember expiry. So when you create a new certificate, they can't live longer than your certificate authority key was. So if you generated a 10-year certificate authority, the device certificates can't be longer than 10 years than the expiry date of that authority. So if you've done it for 1,000 days, and then 2 days have gone past, the next certificate can't be more than 998 days. So you just need to be aware that if one expires, they all expire. So maybe put a date in your diary that says, in 9 years' time, I need to create a new certificate authority certificate that can then be distributed out again. And you can have more than one, so you can keep importing them, so you can create new ones. And I'm going to do a few more things. I haven't had a chance to play around with it, but you can actually use a YubiKey to be a certificate authority. So it effectively, rather than using the OpenSSL kind of libraries that run with a key stored as a file on your Raspberry Pi, it pipes it through the YubiKey, and the YubiKey does the digital signature for you. And you can do certificate revocation lists and things like that, but again, it's all getting a bit much. But just a simple CA for your home, but all possible. Yeah, so that was kind of my little use for a Raspberry Pi, and I'm interested in hearing people's thoughts on this and for any projects and ideas that they've got for theirs. No, you don't have to leave it turned on. Sorry, Richard was asking if it needs to remain powered up. So it doesn't need to be turned on, because all you need to do is turn it on to do the signature, and then copy the signature off, and you can turn it back off again, because it can be entirely offline, because the trust is through the fact that your trusted root certificates shows that you trust that signature, and it's signed by by something with that signature. So
maybe use that Raspberry Pi or something.
you could take the memory card out, you could stick that in a little folder, and then come back to it when you need to sign something else. Sorry?
10 years time, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm assuming that you're going to buy another device in the interim, and you're probably going to need to put a certificate onto that. So you'll have to crack it out every so often when you treat yourself to that new gadget. I think there's some chats going on. No, there's.
I think it's a great project because I had these kind of issues with websites that say, "Oh, do you want to trust this and that?" And I think also in the development community, I've seen this a lot, where, for example, if you want to do, I mean, maybe now it's different, but when you want to upload something to a server that you own, people tend to trust keys without verifying them. And I've seen this in my professional days, and it is very good. I never thought of running a local certificate authority, but it's a very good idea, very neat.
Yeah, the only challenge I found was that I set it up on my different laptop and so on, and then totally forgot about my mobile phone. And I wanted to go and log into a portal on my mobile phone, and it was like certificate errors. I'm like, oh, I forgot about my mobile. So I need to look into how do I import it onto an Android, and so on. Yeah. Any questions in the room?
Yeah, the reason you're going to ask why not keep it offline, but we needed the time. We needed the NTP.
Well, yeah, so you will need NTP to keep the time, but you could, in theory, just not leave it connected to anything. I wanted to connect it so that I could actually download the updates initially anyway. But yeah, you could run it entirely as an offline CA, never connect it to anything. And as long as you remember to set the date and time on boot up, because obviously a Raspberry Pi 2 won't have a real-time clock on it, unless it syncs via NTP. Then yeah, you can do it entirely offline. That's actually the most secure thing. You just have to remember to then copy the certificates via USB stick.
Should pop it up for a shoot that version.
Sorry?
Would 2 be good enough for a shoot that version? Raspberry Pi 2, you think it'd be powerful enough to use it for scanning USBs, like as a shoot that?
For scanning, like antivirus.
Yeah.
So you use a Raspberry Pi 2 to scan. I don't know. That's an interesting one. I think the challenge you've got with the earlier ones is going to be throughput on the USB, because you've only got, it's not, you don't get USB 3 until the Raspberry Pi 4, do you? So you're probably going to be quite limited on throughput there, unfortunately. Yeah, so somebody else said, so other cool ideas people have had is running a weather station on and doing MQTT stuff with Pi 1s and 0s. Someone's turned a Mark 1 Raspberry Pi B into a co-processor for an original BBC Micro. Plays the co-processor version of Elite. That's a throwback there, isn't it? It really is niche. You've got to have the BBC Micro to start with. But I mean, it's a good example of just how versatile they are. One of the other ones I saw kicking around as an idea was Pi-hole, because you can you obviously don't just want one Pi-hole, because if that goes offline, then you lose all your DNS, because it acts as a DNS forwarder for you and filters things. So you kind of want 2 of them running separately, so that way if you lose one, your DNS still resolves. So that's kind of a thought I had as something else to do, is maybe take a couple of old twos, 2 or 3, whatever, maybe even a 1 if it works. Give that a go.
Is it all work for like pixel stuff?
I'm sure you could run NeoPixels, yeah. Yeah, but
Outdoor one, outdoor one.
yeah, so you can definitely run it. Kind of uses DMA to drive it very quickly, so it's possible to do.